Few people in New York at that time realized how complex the caissons actually were, that Washington Roebling designed every feature. He devised an airlock for admitting the workmen and an ingenious method of removing the earth and rock without allowing the compressed air inside to escape. A shaft was passed through the roof of the caisson. It was filled with a column of water, the water held precariously in place by the force of the air inside. Through it, a giant clamshell dredge could move freely as it carried the debris up and out of the caisson to waiting barges. Each decision was described in a drawing, hand-painted with meticulous care, often by Roebling himself, for the benefit of those craftsmen who couldn't read or speak English. On paper, it all worked perfectly.
June 1870. The bed is so rocky that in place of 1 month, 5 are required to do the work. And these are 5 months of incessant worry and toil, everlasting breaking down and repairing, and constant study where to improve if possible.
For Roebling and the men working inside the caisson, with all that weight bearing down overhead and the river outside, it was a terrifying and eerie experience. The force of the compressed air made pulses race, made voices thin and unnatural, and made the danger of fire very serious. Flaming calcium lamps lit one chamber, while the rest of the caisson lay dark and slimy with river mud. Often explosions of compressed air, escaping under the edges, plunged the men into total darkness as several feet of water rushed in. It was said that Washington Roebling was the only one who kept his head.
June 15, 1870. Rate of descent not half a foot this week.
The caisson of the East River Bridge was severely damaged by fire yesterday. I don't believe any man now living will cross that bridge.
I am the chief engineer, and I am in constant attendance day and night except time for sleep. A fire broke out Thursday evening, and I stayed down until about 5 o'clock. I felt I should be paralyzed if I stayed down another minute. I was partially paralyzed, and am not quite over it now.
The damage caused by the fire was repaired at huge cost and effort. The Brooklyn caisson was completed on March 11, 1871, and filled with concrete. Its final position was 44 feet 6 inches below water level. The second caisson, now under construction for the New York side, would have to sink almost 60 feet deeper. It was being lined with boilerplate to prevent fire, but the increased air pressure required inside would cause even graver problems. The Journal of Dr. Andrew H. Smith, surgeon to the Bridge Company.
The pathological effects of high atmospheric pressure I propose to call the caisson disease. From the 25th of January, when I assumed medical charge of the men, 110 cases of sickness occurred, which were fairly due to compressed air. Hugh Rourke, March 12th. Had suffered previously from severe pains in the chest and limbs which compelled him to give up work. Sometime afterward, when the pressure was 4 atmospheres, he resumed work for a single day, the labor being excessively severe. He suffered no inconvenience apparently, however, and after leaving the caisson, washed his hands and face as usual. A moment after, he fell senseless, and in 15 minutes he was dead.
As the caisson descended deeper into the riverbed, the threat of the disease increased.
When the test borings on the New York Tower site revealed that the caisson would have to descend to the appalling depth of 106 feet below water level, all other engineers shrank back. And I had to face this enormous and dangerous task, spending almost 2 years in compressed air and nearly losing my life.
Colonel Roebling was brought up out of the New York caisson, nearly insensible. All that night, his death was hourly expected.
They were suffering from what is now called the bends, caisson disease, an excruciatingly painful affliction caused by nitrogen bubbles in the bloodstream.
By December, Colonel Roebling found himself too weak and ill to go down to the bridge anymore.
At first I thought I would succumb, but I had a tower to lean upon, my wife, a woman of infinite tact and wisest counsel.
Washington had met his bride 8 years earlier during the Civil War.
We've just had the most successful ball ever given by any army or by anyone. Miss Emily Warren, sister of the general, came specially from West Point to attend. It was the first time I ever saw her, and I am very much of the opinion that she has captured my heart at last.
He is unpretentious in manner, and one might scan him for hours and see no traits, except his continuous quiet and strong self-composure. He is a good classical scholar, a fine linguist, and as a mineralogist, he is nearly as widely known as he is as an engineer.
Now confined to his bed, Washington continued the work with Emily's help. She began by taking dictation. As time went on, as she grew fluent in engineering, she became his most valued emissary, his eyes, his ears, his good right arm, a diplomat and a soother of damaged egos. She was also the one person whose company he could tolerate. From fossils brought up out of the riverbed, Roebling determined that the strata upon which the caisson now rested had not shifted in several million years. Faced with the inevitability of another year's digging and the loss of perhaps 100 lives, he weighed the incalculable risk of a weak foundation. And staking his reputation on his own judgment, he halted the caisson's descent almost 30 feet short of bedrock. The decision, entirely Roebling's, was the most daring and difficult of the whole project. And to this day, the New York Tower does not stand on bedrock, but on sand.
Towers, 1870 to 1876.
While the newspapers and the public were transfixed by the drama inside the caissons, the two stone towers grew ever taller and more conspicuous. If the caissons were the test of Roebling's courage and intelligence as an engineer, the towers were the tangible proof that the bridge was going up.
Brooklyn Eagle, September 28, 1872. Everything possible is done by steam. The stone is stored at Red Hook, and a scow brings it to the structure every day. The stones are lifted from the scow by steam and placed on 2 cars on a track. Steam derricks raise them from the cars and place them in their proper position. The spaces are filled up with concrete. Even this is mixed by machinery.
A communication from the stonecutters asking for an increase of 5 cents an hour to their wage was referred to a committee.
The pay of the laborers is as follows. Masons, 30 cents an hour. Day laborers, 12.5 cents an hour. Riggers, 15 cents an hour.
June 25th, 1876. General George Armstrong Custer killed at the Little Bighorn by force of 4,000 Indians. Additional details are anxiously awaited throughout the nation.
Washington Roebling was not seen on the bridge site again. He survived the caisson disease, but he never really recovered. He remained a recluse, suffering from pain, nervousness, failing eyesight, and terrible physical weakness.
I'm an invalid, confined to the house. And minerals are the only things which do not tire or excite me.
For the duration of the construction, Roebling lived on Brooklyn Heights, where he could supervise the work from his bedroom window. And it was from there that he transmitted his detailed instructions through Emily.
It could not have been accomplished but for the unselfish devotion of his assistant engineers. Each man had a certain department in charge, and they worked with all their energies to have the job done properly, according to Colonel Roebling's plans and wishes.
The average age of the engineering staff, Roebling included, was all of 31 years. Colonel William Payne, at 41, was the old man of the staff, while George McNulty was barely 20.
February 1875. The work that should be pressed forward with all dispatch is the New York anchorage, in order that it be completed by the time the masonry of the towers is ready for cable making.
Located 900 feet inland on both shores, two massive stone anchorages would be constructed to secure the ends of the four great suspension cables. The cables would be fixed to chains of long iron eye-bars that disappeared into the anchorage and were in turn tied to four cast iron anchor plates embedded deep within the granite.
When I place a certain amount of dead weight in the shape of granite on the anchor plates, I know it will remain there beyond all contingency.
In 1871, the notorious William Marcy Tweed was New York's school commissioner, the assistant street commissioner, president of the Board of Supervisors, a New York state senator, chairman of the Democratic Central Committee, grand sachem of Tammany Hall, and a trustee of the New York and Brooklyn Bridge Company.
The testimony of William Marcy Tweed.
Mr. Murphy, who was a brother senator, called on me and stated that he was president of the Brooklyn Bridge and desired to have the Common Council authorize $1.5 million for the benefit of that bridge. I conversed with a gentleman on the board, and he said the appropriation could be had by paying for it. Either $55,000 or $65,000 was agreed upon. Mr. Murphy told me to go ahead and make the negotiations.
With Boss Tweed in jail, a pall of sarcasm and suspicion fell over every public enterprise in the city.
The Brooklyn Tower of the East River Bridge was completed on the 16th of December. It is very imposing in appearance. We hope it will not prove a tower of folly.
November 8th, 1876. Samuel Tilden has won the popular vote, but they say that Governor Hayes of Ohio will be the president.
In 1876, America's 100th birthday was marked by a World's Fair in Philadelphia, a gaudy celebration of technology. John Roebling's sons had an exhibition in a hall which enclosed 13 acres of brand new mechanical inventions. But the centennial also brought the infamous contested election of Rutherford B. Hayes, a disastrous bridge collapse in Ashtabula, Ohio, and an underlying strain of doubt and disillusionment in the face of the celebration.
It would be foolish, if not wicked, to spend any more money on a bridge that is not called for, very seriously damages the commerce of this harbor, taxes the financial ability of these two cities to the utmost, and cannot fail to be taken down by the mandate of the courts or demolished by the winds.
Cables, 1876 to 1878.
As John Roebling had intended, the four main suspension cables would be constructed in place, high above the river. Number 8-gauge wires, less than 1/4 of an inch in diameter, would be pulled strand by strand from great spools fixed on the Brooklyn anchorage. A traveler rope would take the wire up and over the Brooklyn Tower, out over the river, up and over the other tower, and down to the far anchorage, where it would be looped around the anchor chain and then returned to the Brooklyn side. The wires were laid up parallel, like pencils bound by rubber bands. Each finished cable would contain 6,289 such wires, over 3,500 miles, bundled tightly together, 331 wires to a strand, 19 strands to a cable.